Hello everybody, welcome to Wine World TV, the best wine show anywhere. I'm your host, Mark Fusco. Before we get started, make sure you're smashing that like button and subscribing to the channel. Every like and subscription helps build the channel. Even better, spread the word to your friends about the best wine show anywhere. All right, it's time once again for my Thanksgiving Day special. If you haven't noticed, there hasn't been any videos since Halloween, and well, that's by design. For the rest of the year, I'm only putting out my specials. So the next two will be Christmas and New Year's. In January, I'll resume my normal programming with my Texas Restaurant Association videos from May. Yeah, I know. That means they're coming out 8 months after the fact. I'll probably have a video about my plans for the next 12 to 24 months as the first one for the year. But let's talk about the right now. Kind of continuing the theme from Halloween, this special's wines all come from the same winery. While the Halloween wines technically came from the same brand, each was made at a different winery. These are all the same winery rather than different custom crush facilities. The winery, you ask? Turley. For many, many years, Turley has been synonymous with Zinfandel, and Zinfandel is a traditional wine for Thanksgiving here in the US. Let's find out more about both, beginning with Zinfandel actually. So Zinfandel is an old grape. How old? I'm not entirely sure. From what I can tell, it's at least from the 15th century in Croatia. Now let's backtrack a bit. Under the name Zinfandel, it's been around since, well, the late 1820s in the US. For many years, it was considered a native grape variety from California. Eventually, in the latter part of the 20th century, people smarter than me started figuring out its origin. From what we know now, or what we now know through DNA testing, its origin is Croatia, and it's thought to be one of the oldest Croatian grapes. It's first mentioned by what is considered the original name Tribodrag in the 15th century, with additional mentions in 1518, 1521, and 1546. At some point, it also adopted the name, wait for it, Celiana Kastelanski. So depending on who you're talking to, they will use one of these two names. I don't know about you, but Tribodrag is much easier to pronounce. You may also know it is the same grape as Primitivo in Italy, specifically in the Puglia region, where it's been there for at least 200 years under that name. There is some speculation that Italy is the origin for the grape, but there isn't any DNA evidence to back that up, only the Croatian origin. Besides these names, there are almost 24 other names, which many being a variation of the ones I've just told you. If you want to go down the rabbit hole further, check out the Wikipedia link in the description. Also check out Jancis Robinson's book, Wine Grapes. It is the definitive guide to all grapes used to make wine. There's an affiliate link to the Amazon listing below in the description. Let's move on to the star of the show, Turley. Now, first of all, I need to admit something a bit embarrassing. First, as long as I've known the Turley name up until last October, I thought Helen Turley was the owner and winemaker at Turley Cellars. Nope. While she was their first winemaker, from what I can tell, she stopped being the winemaker there after 1995. Here's the thing. From my very unscientific small survey of other industry people, pretty much everyone thinks this, or at least a great number of people. Many who are smarter than I am. Okay, yes, a lot of people also know she's not associated with the winery anymore, but anyone I bring up the subject to doesn't realize this. So what is the story behind the winery? I'll just quote the website because it's kind of a funny story. All right, quote, born in Tennessee and raised in Georgia, Larry has spent the better part of his life on a farm. This being the South, they were primarily tobacco and dairy farms. Nevertheless, his respect for the land and its cultivation began at a young age. As an adult, Larry channeled this passion for preservation towards people, studying medicine, and working as an emergency room physician. After moving to California in the mid-70s, Larry came home from the ER one night to discover someone camped on his property. After first driving his motorcycle through the tent, this was, after all, the 1970s in the, quote, Wild Wild West, he met his occupant, John Williams, the soon-to-be winemaker at Spring Mountain. After sharing a glass of wine, they became friends. After a few bottles later, they became business partners. Frog's Leap Winery was begat in 1981 with Larry on a tractor by day and suturing by night. All right, so Frog's Leap is an iconic winery, and Larry and John were the founders. In 1993, Larry sold his half of Frog's Leap to John to start Turley Wine Cellars. The original location is in St. Helena in Napa Valley. That location is not open to the public and is listed as a private residence on their website. At least I'm assuming that is the original location for Turley Wine Cellars. There is a Turley Wine Cellars in St. Helena, in Napa, and no, you can't visit it. However, their estate vineyards are there in what appears to be a winery. They purchased the Pezzenti Winery in Templeton in the Paso Robles AVA at some point afterwards. This appears to be their main location. Vineyards, a winery, and a tasting room are here. They have another tasting room in the north in Plymouth. It is listed as their Amador County tasting room. It's in the Sierra Foothills AVA. Now, that AVA is pretty massive and spans several counties. It also has vineyards, a tasting room, and what appears to be a winery. As far as what wines are made where, I don't know, assuming winemaking facilities at all three properties, then the wines closest to those facilities are where they are made, and then wines that just hold a California designation may depend on what's the best facility for each of those wines. At least that's what I do. Okay, so back to Helen Turley. Who is she? Well, Helen is Larry's sister. She's been a winemaker and consultant to numerous wineries since the mid-1980s. She founded Marcaston Vineyards with her husband, John Wetlaufer, in 1990. Helen and Larry teamed up in 1993, but that ended a couple years later in 1995. Don't know why, and it's also not important for our purposes. Just making sure we're all on the same page. And to point out that while she's not the owner or winemaker, she is someone you should know, okay? Link to her below as well. Turley, the winery, basically specializes in Zinfandel. Now, they make 50 wines from over 50 vineyards, focus on Zinfandel and Petit Syrah. They also have a Cabernet Sauvignon, a red blend, a white blend, and this really cool Cinsault. One of Turley's calling cards is their extensive use of, quote, old vine vineyards. Many, but not all of their vineyards are what they classify as old vine. For them, this is at least 50 years. Turley's 50-year-old minimum comes from the Historic Vineyard Society. Now, there is no legal definition of old vines on a national scale anywhere in the world. However, there are a few organizations like the Historic Vineyard Society that have created definitions. I'll leave links to those also. The benefit to old vines are as follows. Deeper roots, typically dry farmed, lower yields, which should create a higher concentration, more complexity, better resistance to disease and drought. There are probably some others, but these are the most cited from what I've seen over the years. One of these wines is from a vineyard planted in 1886. So it must be karma. A few days after writing this script, lo and behold, the OIV, or the International Organization of Vine and Wine. No, that doesn't match up to OIV. OIV, I think, is French for something. If I remember, I'll put it in the lower third. Anyway, they put out a press release saying that they've, quote, standardized what an old vine is. One thing to note, they are not a governmental organization, so their standard isn't legally binding anywhere. However, they are looked to as an authority on all things concerning wine, so we may see places like the EU adopt their standard. As far as farming practices, I can't be 100% certain as they don't mention organic, sustainable, bio, or regenerative per se, though I get the impression they do as little as possible in the vineyard as well as in the winery. Most of their harvest seems to be by hand, either explicitly stated or implied from the type of training they use. And many of the wines use native yeast fermentation. As far as these specific wines, I had all three last October, though different vintages for the Juvenile and the White Zin. Yes, I said White Zin. I'll get to that a little bit later. For now, let's get the stats for the wines. First, the 2023 Turley Zinfandel Rosé, aka White Zinfandel, sells for $34.95. It's from California. It's sourced from the counties of Napa and San Joaquin. 100% Zinfandel. Fermentation, native yeast. Aging, 7 months in 100% used French oak. It's unfined. The ABV is 12.5%, and the first vintage for that is 2011. This wine is a selection of early picked grapes throughout their vineyards. While they don't give the RS, this is a dry, quote, White Zin. They and others affectionately call it that as a sort of like tongue-in-cheek reference to the stereotypical semi-sweet to sweet White Zins. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Zinfandel Rosé was actually a thing, and it was dry. I'll let you read about the story of White Zin in the Wikipedia entry I linked about Zinfandel. I'm pretty sure this is mostly a restaurant-only wine with limited retail. Next, we have the 2022 Turley Bechtold Vineyard Cinsault. It sells for $39.95. Comes from Lodi AVA. It is, in the sub-AVA is the Mokelumne River. 100% Cinsault. The vineyard is the Bechtold Vineyard, planted 1886. The soil is sandy loam. Viticulture, head-trained, ungrafted, dry-farmed. Hand-harvested. Fermentation is native yeast. Aging is also 7 months in 100% used French oak. It is unfined. The ABV is 12.5%. The first vintage was 2008, and the production is, from what I remember from last year's presentation, around 800 cases. Now, for me, this was the, quote, star of the show last year. When I asked how much they produced, like I said, I remember it being about 800 cases, with about 25 cases coming to Texas. It's allocated and normally only available at a restaurant or wine bar, but they will make exceptions for small boutique wine shops or small chains, which is where I got it from. It's a great alternative to Pinot Noir, which is a very common Thanksgiving wine. Lastly, we have the 2022 Turley Juvenile Zinfandel. Sells for $29.99. From California, 100% Zinfandel. Vineyards, there's 11 counties that they source from, including Hain in the St. Helena AVA in Napa, the Pezenti Vineyard, which is in the Willow Creek AVA in Paso Robles, which is in San Luis Obispo County, Salvador, which is in Contra Costa County, and Vineyard 101, which is in the Alexander Valley AVA, which is in Sonoma County, and Fredericks, which is in the Moon Mountain AVA, which is also in Sonoma County, the Kirschenmann, which is in the Mokelumne River AVA in Lodi, which we also know is in that sub-AVA, which is the San Joaquin County. Whew, okay, age of vines, anywhere from 6 to 25 years. Fermentation, native yeast. Aging, 12 months, 95% used oak, 5% new oak, 80% of all that is French oak, and 20% is American oak. It is unfined. It is ABV is 15.2%. The first vintage was 1999. They tag the younger vines and pick them separately. The text sheet doesn't specify hand harvesting, but depending on where these younger vines are located in each vineyard, it's possible they are hand harvested, or machine, or both. And since this is a blend of different vineyards, the exact makeup may vary from year to year. All right, let's get into the wines. I am super excited. So, I didn't know exactly what I was going to be doing for my Thanksgiving episode. My Thanksgiving episode. So I go through this every year. I try to figure out what I'm going to do and what I'm going to feature and all that. And my Christmas episode, originally that was going to be the wines for this episode, but then I was like, Turley is really cool. And I know I have access to the White Zin and the Cinsault, which, are, like I said, they're not necessarily easy to find. So I went ahead and did that. And then I figured the Juvenile, because it's kind of the most accessible of the other ones. It's also not as expensive as some of the single vineyard offerings, the old vines. I mean, they're not like $100, or at least the ones I've seen are not like $100, but the Juvenile is a little bit less expensive. And this Cinsault, I was just absolutely just in love with it. Now you won't find this Cinsault on the market from. I know the rep who handles it here, and they're waiting for the new vintage. So it may not be in the market yet. And like I said, with so few cases made, depending on where you are in the country and how strict they are with it needs to be an on-premise or restaurant only thing. I mean, you may have to go to a very specialized wine shop, or there are restaurants that might sell it to you. I know in Texas, from the pandemic thing, they had loosened the laws concerning purchasing unopened bottles of wine. And if I remember correctly, as long as you're buying food, you are able to purchase an unopened bottle of wine. Otherwise, before all that, you could take a bottle of wine home, but you had to at least pour out a small amount. Just quirky laws in the state of Texas, and every state's got their stupid laws and things that are just like, what? All right, so White Zin. So this is looking kind of orange. So, and I don't remember it being this color, but you know, we'll see. I do see like particles in here. So that unfined, a little bit of unfiltered. So it's got a little bit of stuff now. Some of this might be the cork, because when you do the Corvin, sometimes pieces of cork will fall in there, so you'll get that. So I can't tell off the top of my head, is that cork or it's just, I think it's just cork. Yeah, I think it's just cork. Anyway, but it's very, very almost orange salmon color. Not quite as pink as you would normally get from, say, other rosés. Let's take a sniffy sniff, if you will.
Let's give it a snippy sniff.
I get hints of red berries and watermelon. It's really, really light on the nose. I'm not getting a whole lot. It is not ice cold. I mean, I put it in the fridge for a little while. I pulled it out while I was getting set up. The bottle does not feel ice cold at all. Matter of fact, the bottle feels almost room temperature, which is, actually ideal for evaluation purposes. Get a little red apple too, I feel like. Touch of cranberry. I mean, it's super light. It's probably going to be all on the palate, so just get on the palate. So dry, like it should be. Red fruits. So cranberry, little raspberry, little blackberry. Very dry in nature. A touch of earthiness to it. Not a ton, but a little bit of like Forest 4 type of thing. Now, to kind of get into a technical thing with the recording, I'm noticing the lights are kind of flickering a bit. Normally I don't see these, and these are LEDs. Normally I don't see them flicker, but I feel like I see them flickering. And this happened before, and I thought I'd see it on the video, and I didn't. So in case you notice it, I don't know what it is, but every once in a while they do that. And they're plugged in, they're not battery operated. And I've been using these lights forever. I mean, literally probably like 10 years at this point. A little bit of potpourri on this. It kind of almost comes across as more of a lighter red wine than kind of like a typical rosé, which is for me usually strawberry watermelon. I don't really get those on there. I get more of just regular red fruits. There is, again, a little bit of earthiness, a little bit of bramble, a little bit of potpourri. So this is a beautiful rosé. And I mean, Zinfandel Rosé, we don't see a lot of it as far as like in a dry form. We do see it in that White Zin. So yeah, this would be perfect for Thanksgiving. It'll go great with the stuffing, with your turkey, your ham, even to start off things. So if you're having any type of salad, it'll go great. Especially if you have something with a little bit of like a kind of earthiness and bitterness to it. Not that it's sweet, it just will complement it. So if you have like, say, spinach, or if you have like a spring mix, mescaline, whatever they call it, spring mix type of thing, it's a little more bitter than, say, like iceberg lettuce. So that would be really cool. And pick any type of dressing, but I can see something like a raspberry vinaigrette type of thing, not necessarily like ranch dressing, but hey, if that's your thing, that's your thing, okay? Honey mustard dressing probably with this pairing would go well. But if you like blue cheese, ranch, all that kind of dressings, that's fine. But I would go with something that's more lighter instead of heavier as far as the dressing with that salad, especially if you're doing like a spinach salad. And if you want to have like a little bit of like a touch of sweetness or whatever, if you want to put like the typical with spinach salads, those candy pecans, you can do that. So you get a little bit of crunch, a little bit of sweetness, goes really great with the rosé. All right, the Cinsault. So Cinsault is very Pinot-like. It's a great substitute for Pinot. If you want to be like the cool kid on the block, instead of bringing Pinot like everybody else is going to bring, you bring Cinsault. Make sure this is it. Make sure this is the Cinsault. It is. Okay. I mean, I looked at it ahead of time, but I was also trying to decide, do I want to do the Cinsault last or the Zinfandel last? But decided to do the Zinfandel last because it's going to be a heavier wine per se. Oh, man. So it's got earthiness to it. It's got very dried fruit, cranberry, raspberry, okay? Bramble, earthiness, forest floor, and it's got a touch of spice to it. Like the Zinfandel, it's really all on the palate. It's even more on the palate. It's more expressive than the rosé was. It's kind of a spice-driven wine, and you've got, again, dried red fruit, potpourri. You've got the cranberry, you've got raspberry, you have the earthiness, you have like sage. So you've got like sage, you've got almost a bit of like, you've got a little bit of oregano in there, a little basil. I mean, this thing is just stunning. This is basically a first that, you know, this particular vintage I've already had, and I'm having it again a year later, by the way. Whereas these should be, I know this is not the vintage I had because it's the 23. This should not have been the same vintage as last year. This should have been the new vintage. But yeah, this is absolutely stunning. I mean, we're going out for Thanksgiving, so we're not necessarily going to have these for Thanksgiving, but these could be used for Christmas. It could be just drink them whenever I want. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having this with some really good, whether it's holiday food or just anything. All right, and let's get to the Zinfandel. Oh, I didn't talk about color on this one. So, I mean, it's a lighter color. Basically, it looks like a Pinot, honestly. So the Zinfandel, a little bit darker, more like ruby and darker, and mostly opaque, but a little, you can kind of see through it a little bit. So Zinfandel isn't necessarily a thick-skinned grape variety. It should be slightly translucent, not as translucent as Pinot Noir, though it could be. But it shouldn't be like completely opaque, like say a Cab or Merlot or any of those other ones like that. So this has got a little bit richer aromas to it. So I'm getting raspberry, a little bit of blackberry. I feel like getting a little bit of blueberry in this. There's some spices, some earth. I've got some kind of oregano. And I mean, so Zinfandel is one of those wines or one of those grapes that doesn't ripen evenly. So you can get super ripe, underripe, and just ripe, all in the same bunch. And unless you're doing like unless you're specifically harvesting at the berry level, you're going to get all that. So I kind of get that kind of smorgasbord, I've been using that word lately, of just everything. And I feel like there's like a touch of vanilla. I mean, it's not a lot of new oak on this, but if I remember correctly, it was like a touch, like 5%. No, 20%. Let's look it up. 5% new oak, yeah. So basically, the nose, the palate confirms the nose. But it's more intense. So it's got that dried red fruit. It's got that little bit of bramble. It's got that spice component. It's got like a woodsy character to it, a bramble, woodsy, forest floor. But it's got that kind of mixture of ripe and underripe fruit, so a little bit tart, a little bit not sweet, but sweet tart's a great way to put it, but it's not a sweet wine by any means. It's super delicious. This is really great if you're like for your cranberry sauce, again, the dressing, your turkey. If you did something a little different, like you say did roast beef or pot roast, this would be great with that. It's not super intense, it's not super heavy, but it's definitely higher in the intensity level than the Cinsault. And yeah, it's got that, it's got that, it's ripeness on, I guess this is 15 too, and it doesn't feel like it. I mean, I'm starting to feel it a little bit now. So yeah, I can see that. But yeah, it's kind of like, it starts off like the fruit's kind of sweet and really ripe, and then it kind of finishes tart. You're kind of like, where do I go with this? But lots of raspberry, and there's also like a raspberry candy shell to it. Absolutely delicious. So if you're looking for something a little different, for not necessarily different for Thanksgiving as far as like it's Zinfandel, but a Zinfandel Rosé that's not sweet, something that kind of acts like a Pinot Noir for your Pinot Noir lovers, and then just straight up just good, tasty, juicy Zinfandel that's not going to be extremely expensive. This is not an inexpensive wine by any means. None of them are inexpensive for most people. These are wonderful wines to throw in for Thanksgiving rather than doing Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. Nothing wrong with those. Of course, there's all the cool wines you can do for Thanksgiving, but I thought this would be kind of cool to highlight one winery, an American winery, instead of doing like old world stuff, and a winery that's known for making really, really badass Zinfandel. All right, so that's going to do it for today's show. If you enjoy what I'm doing here, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and then tell your friends, and we'll see you next time. Maybe with some Turley Cinsault.